Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm skipping forward a couple of months. See you in a minute. Now we've got a bit of a major shift in gear now with the Cyclekart. There was a period after, from about August when we went on holiday last year through to almost November where the whole project sort of stalled. That was because we came back off holiday after a fortnight away and we had some scan results from my wife from an operation that she'd had 6 months or so earlier, and they weren't really happy with them, and that threw us into a spell of turmoil with having to run around different hospitals and getting different scans. Turned out it wasn't a major problem, it's just that the one scan that we had couldn't tell the difference between the tumour and scar tissue, so that's all resolved now. And as we came out of the meeting that they were telling us that it wasn't really a problem, they then said, oh, and by the way, we think there's a possibility there's an issue with a bowel problem, maybe. So we've got into the whole process again of hospitals and waiting around and scans and cameras and all sorts of stuff like that. And again, it's resolved itself out to being nothing. But during that 2 months, nothing happened at all on the cart, really, because I wasn't in the right place to be doing anything on it. But it sort of coincides with a bit of a step change in the way it's working. Up until now I've had let's build a chassis, and we build a chassis. Let's start on the front suspension, we start on the front suspension, and so it went on, getting all the main components roughly sorted. Since November time it's changed completely into putting a car together. And the problem is there's an awful lot of interdependent things with that. So for instance, if I want to get it started, so that needs the electrics sorting. And to do that I've got to place the battery, and that means that the pedal box is got to be sorted out to work around that. And all of the electrical bits have to be fitting into panels of the car. So I've got to start mounting things there, and that means I also needed to get the dashboard sorted. So you get all this sort of interconnection. Can't do the dashboard until I get the steering column sorted, and so on. So the whole build got a bit more sort of chaotic, but as far as the videos are concerned, it means I'm going to be skipping about a bit. I will try and keep it so that 1 week I'm working on the steering column, 1 week I'm working on the dashboard. But in reality this has been going on for probably a period of 2 or 3 months. The tail section I'm working on, that started back in, I think, November. I can't honestly remember because time has just gone by. But it's certainly been probably 6 months since that tail has been started. It's still sitting in the garage waiting to have the glass fibre put on it. Partly because it's just not on the critical path at the moment, and therefore it gets dealt with when I've got a bit of time to spare. I've just been spending today gluing louvers onto bonnet and side panels. This is in May. They were done months ago, but it's only because I'm waiting for a chain to come to connect up the rear engine to the gearbox and the rear wheel. So there's a lot more chaotic sort of interaction between things. So you'll find that it may be confusing in that 1 week you'll see something finished and the next week I'm starting to do it and things like that. But hopefully we can still keep some sort of a flow on the build. Hope the video is interesting. Let's dive in and see where we go with a fairly major sort of start by almost taking the whole thing apart and working our way through it slowly as we work from front to back, getting it right as we go, or as right as I can, prior to paint, if you like. but I'm just trying to get it all nailed down now, so that whereas it was roughly bolted together before, it's now properly bolted together with lock washers and all sorts of, you know, things like that that are needed, but I can't really let the thing go out on the track without making sure it's right first. Now, I've not been out into the garage for about 2 months or more, what with my wife's little health scare and COVID and going on holiday, and things have rather stagnated a bit, but I think we've got a change today coming that will start and make a difference. Now, this has just been delivered, so I'm not going to unbox it here and now because it's not really worth it. You can see what it is, but it marks a fairly significant point, because what I'm going to do is use this car cover, which is a small one, to push Hetty outside for a bit into the cold winter, unfortunately, under a car cover, so that I can get the whole of the Cyclekart down onto the floor level and start and do a proper build up, starting at the front, work my way through. I'm nearly there with everything that I need to do. I can put it up on a pair of trestles, but at the moment it's getting to the point where it's too high to do anything with it, and I don't want to have to just disassemble it all just to lift it down and then have to reassemble it again. What I'm trying to do this time now is to get it on, as I say, maybe on a couple of trestles, but so I can lift it up and lift it off quite easily, and I'll put all the back together, and maybe we can see if we can get a running rolling chassis. Right, so the time has come to get all this lot cleared out and get Kay up on a pair of stands. So I've got to get Hetty out the way first, put that in outside under a cover for a bit. We need the boiler servicing anyway, so it's all got to be cleared out to do that, so I might as well take advantage and do that, clear up, and see how we get on, see how long it takes us to get it tidied up and ready. Right, so that's got me the space to reassemble the cart and start and put it together finally. I'm going to need some sort of workbench to sit it on to get it up to a height that it's not breaking my back all the while. I'll probably just use a couple of workhorses temporarily, but I need to get something a bit more substantial, I think, at some point. But we'll just start with that and get the chassis started anyway and put it back together again. Now I'm just preparing the nose cone for a bit of primer to sort of find out what sort of finish I've got underneath it all. There's a lot of work will need to be done on it with filler and things, but I'm just getting off the old release agent which is on it with some warm water, a little bit of wet and dry just to take the high spots off, and then when that's done I can put a coat of primer on it and get a rough idea as to where we are. Probably need a little bit of work on the back edge, certainly a little bit of work on some of the joints here, where the joints in the mould were, just to smooth things out. But we'll get it in a state that we can get some primer on it first, and then I can deal with it from there on. I'm not going to spend too long on it because until it's properly fitted, which will be, you know, a little bit later on, there's not a lot of point, but I do want to get a coat of primer on just to see what sort of task I've got to put it right. So I've got the whole of the chassis now up on the trestle. As I mentioned earlier, I'm probably going to get something a bit more substantial than that, but it's a nice height to work on and I can get at it all the way around it. And I have made a start already on some of the sorts of things that I'm going to be doing on this now on the final assembly. I've checked all the bolts on the front end. Had a thought the other night in this quest for adding lightness, I might well just drill a couple of big holes in there and there. I'll think about that one. I'm getting some work done on the pedals, which will be on the pedal box video earlier or later. I've also been working on these side brackets that I took off. I've never been very happy with them because they were a bit flimsy. I've done the best I can, I think, because there's alloy and steel involved. These steel liners that keep the bolt from compressing the bracket were loose because they couldn't weld them in. So what I've done is to I've actually put them in, put the bolt through, put a little bit of super glue along the bottom to seal it, and then I've just flooded that whole area at the bottom with resin, which effectively locks that tube to the back plate, and it has made the whole thing feel a lot more substantial. Whether it will last, I don't know. This is one of the things that I suspect will be, if there's a fail point, that's going to be one of them. And what I think will happen is that I'll start to see bending and cracking if I get anything, because that's taking all the suspension forward and backward loads off the front spring, front axle I mean. But we'll see how it goes. If not, it's a simple matter that can then just be refabricated in steel, rather than, I understood these to be stainless steel from China, and you can't believe a word they say, and it's in fact an alloy. But we'll get onto that one. But again, those will be tidied up now and sprayed up in the right colour. I'll do them in the green, I think. So we are making some progress slowly. It's going to be a slow slog, but we're into the winter now, so we can take our time with it. Nothing to do competition wise. I've also painted up all the front steering arm part and tightened all that up and got it. I'm happy with that now. Again, I need to get a collar on that just to be able to push the steering column back a bit if I have to, but I've got that on order as well. So we're making some progress already. The downside to this, of course, is that I can't use the downstairs toilet because it's full of Cyclekart bits at the moment, but hopefully as soon as we start and put things back together, that will ease the situation a bit. So there's a couple of things I want to do to the bolts on the Cyclekart that hold the frame together. Firstly is to stop them undoing without using a shake-proof washer, so I'm going to wire them up, and for that I'm going to need to drill a hole through the head, and then I want to take all the markings off the underneath of the top of the bolt head itself, which are a modern sort of thing which you wouldn't have had in the 1920s. But we'll start with this hole in the top, which is stainless steel bolt with a 2mm hole through it. Right, having got the bolt hole drilled through the bolt, we'll just put the get rid of the lettering on top with a file. That spins the top up nicely. Okay, a bit of copper grease on the bolt to stop it. Well, it's like an anti-seize, stops this galling of the stainless on aluminium. Just keeps it from sticking together, so that when you, if you want to take the bolt out in the future, it doesn't rip the aluminium apart. Tighten that up. Right, so they're tightened up, but I want to stop them undoing now. And the way that the aircraft boys and some of the old vintage race cars, and indeed probably modern stuff, do it is with some stainless steel wire. Just pinch a bit off. And that is threaded through the hole. And what we need to do is make it so that the bolt can't undo, which is that way. So we want to stop that rotation. So if we get a piece of wire twisted, tighten up, undo, yeah. We want to, if we pull it this way effectively, it will stop it undoing. So I've got a little tool here that will get me roughly where I want to be. Just find the hole in the bottom, which is round here. So I'll put the little machine on here, tighten that up, clamp that on. It, and then we want to go around that way. take another thread of the wire through this bolt and then out the other side and twist it up again. What that effectively does is form like an S shape, that the only way you will undo it, if you pull on that one, you'll tighten this bolt and vice versa. That way should stop them coming undone. That's it. Pliers on that. And then trim that up. That's it. And then fold it back in on itself, because these things are very sharp and likely to take a hand off if you're not careful. There we go. And that's it. And as I say, now if that bolt tries to undo, which is that way, it'll just pull tightly on that one and try and tighten it up so it doesn't shake loose. Right, that's the first part of the front end, sort of in the final assembly, if you like. I've lacquered the scratch brush finish on the front there on the die bond, lacquered the spring, cleaned it up, tidied that up, and the brackets on top, so hopefully that won't be a rust problem. All of these brackets have been lacquered. I did the machine turning on the front plate, and that's lacquered. All the bolts have had the markings taken off them, so they look a little bit more authentic. I've wired up the front frame bolts, so really that's the way I'm hoping to work all the way back through the cart now. Get all these things as close as I can to the way I want to see them, other than paint. And I'm not sure about painting on it, whether or not we'll probably just paint the outside of the frame rails and leave the rest aluminium, I think, anyway, so it shouldn't be too much of a chore. I shouldn't have to strip too much down, it'll just be body off. The top bracket here has all been tidied up and lacquered, and again the bolt sorted out so that it's got no markings on it. Put the collars in for the steering column to stop it going down too far. That's fitted now. That's all tightened up, and if you like, from there forward is now as finished as I think I want to see it. All of these bolts have been tightened up and got the lock washers underneath. I've done the bolts in the middle. They're all tidied up and ready and tightened in. I've just got to do the arms out here, but we'll move on to those later. Now I've got the bonnet fitting, I'm going to move on to the next thing, which is to get this tank, or dummy tank, fitted. Just needs a couple of bolts, I think, through there and there into threaded inserts, so I can take it out for access, but it'll hold it in, I think, sufficiently well, and just clear the underneath of the bonnet, and then we can tick another thing off the list. I'm going to do a couple of inserts underneath in die bond, just to sort of fill in that bit of timber work there like that, so that it's all aluminium again, and then we can start and think about moving further back into the engine bay. Now, one thing I didn't think about when I was doing all the hot lightning holes on the scuttle was that it leaves the woodwork behind exposed, and although I suppose the easiest thing to do would be to just paint it black in there, I want to try and keep a sort of a standard line of black, if you like. If I sprayed that black, there'd still be holes that you could see that there was a line behind it. So I've got some thin plastic card here. I'm just going to turn that up, put that away. What I'm going to do then is just take that panel off, and then I'll slide that behind the hole set up right the way down, and then I can spray that black, cut it to shape, and you'll have a line of black holes rather than black with bits you can see through and bits you can't. So and that's the finished effect after the cowl's on. All of this is going to be behind the dashboard, so you won't really see much of it, but I think it's made a much tidier job of it all anyway. Time for an update on the Cyclekart. It's stagnated for about a month for a number of reasons. One, I suspect I'm probably a little bit hesitant because I'm nearly there with the engine. It's just got to be finally mounted. There's a little bit of adjustment I want to do on that chain alignment, but we're nearly there, and I think it's that sort of almost fear of getting that sorted that has stalled it a bit. But that's not really the main reason. I've been very busy, and there have been a load of other things that I've got to do that have taken precedence, but so I can't even remember where I was up to with the putting it all together. The front end is now pretty much sorted. All of the joints and everything have all been done, tightened up, greased. The steering is now in and working, which if I'd got all this rubbish out the way you could see. All the panels are mounted, cockpit's mounted. So as far as all that's concerned, it's pretty much there. There's couple of things, minor cosmetics. I've got to do some work just on the nose cone, which I may have mentioned, but more importantly there is an issue with the steering at the moment. If I can just move it across a bit, there's a little bit of play in the steering, and there's two reasons for that. One is that it needs a bush in this top end mount, which is fine, I've got to do that, that's nylon. But the other is at the other end. Let me just get the bonnet off. The other is here with this arrangement. There's a little bit of slack in that
connection there, which I think I can take out with a plate in there, but at the moment it's just giving a little bit of movement of the shaft at that end, and I want to take that out just to tighten things up a bit. I've now got the brake cable, the brake pipe that's arrived, so I can fit that and get that sorted out. I've got to sort an accelerator cable out, but other than that I think we're pretty much there. I've done all the cosmetic stuff, I've done all the bolt wiring and that on the front end. The other thing I'm not entirely convinced by is this lateral movement on the front axle. There was a suggestion that if I tighten this up really tight, that would give me effectively a front end that wouldn't move around. I'm not convinced that's going to be the answer, so it may be that now is the time to put a longer bolt in one side here and put a panhard rod in. I've got all the bits for it, and I think if I do that it should stiffen that front end up. So that's where we are with the front end. As I say, the back I've still got to do all the wiring on these bolts, but until I know I'm going to finish taking the back end out, I might take the back end out to try the tail buck in there. So I've left those undone at the moment, and I've got the mount for engine mounting bolts, but otherwise back end is pretty much there. I've got to mount the disc brake, but what has also been taking the time is the tail itself, and that's a separate video, but you can see that we're pretty much on with the tail buck. I'm just on to final bits of finishing and sanding on there now, but we're nearly there with that. That'll be smoothed off, covered in this silver tape, covered in release agent, and then we can take a mould off it, and that is taking forever. I mean, I can put some more filler on like I did yesterday, and it'll take 2 or 3 days for a thin skim to go off because the weather's cold. Some of the big areas where I've had quite a lot of filler in, I've gone in 3 or 4 weeks after, and when I get down inside it, it's still wet. So it's taken a long while to do that, so that's stalled things a bit, but it's all progress anyway.
Okay, so things are starting to pick up with the build now. It's beginning to look a bit less like a series of individual components, and in some respects a bit more like a car. So I'm quite happy with that. I hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye.